What's up guys, how are you doing? I'm really happy to announce that in this video, finally we're going to learn JWT authentication using Golang. We'll be using the JWT Go package to create the entire authentication logic. We'll be using Gin and Gonic to create the APIs. So we'll have APIs for sign up, for login, for getting the list of all the users and getting a user by ID. We'll be storing these users in our MongoDB database. All right, so we're going to cover a lot of things: Gin and Gonic, MongoDB, Golang, JWT Authentication, and I'll also show you how to create these awesome logs in your terminal. As you can see, these logs are being generated. I have the program running in the background. So if I try signing up, by the way, I left out one thing. We also have validation in this video. So I'm going to also show you how to validate the response, the request coming from a postman. All right. So if I use the same email and phone number to sign up the user, it says this email or phone number already exists. So if I change the email address, it still says this email or phone number already exists. That means I have to change my phone number as well. So I'll change my phone number. Let's see what happens. So now it has inserted the user for me in the database. All right. And now I can use the same email address and the same password in my login API. So let me also copy the password. And if I log in, it basically gives me the token. So if I copy this token, and I can now use this token in my /users API. So I can come here, paste the token, and then I can send, and I'll get the count of all the users in my database, and I'll get all the user objects that exist in my database. Now I can do one more thing. I can copy any ID from the users, and I can go to get user by ID API, and I can just paste the ID here, and we can get that particular user as well. So sign up, login, get all users, and get user by ID. So we have a lot to learn, a lot to cover. I might have to break down the video into 3 or 4 different videos because of the length of this video. So and also I have to go to office as well. So obviously I have to break it down because I don't get a long time to shoot in just one day. So we'll get started right now, and let's see how far we can go before I have my next business call. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start from the terminal. I'm in a place in my laptop where I usually keep my Golang code. So here I'm going to create a new directory called Golang JWT project. I'm going to cd into it, and I'm going to go mod it. So I'll say go mod init github.com/akhil/Golang JWT project. All right. So this has created a go.mod file for me. If you're from a JavaScript background, this basically means npm init is exactly the same thing. The go.mod file will keep a list of all the dependencies of this project. I'm going to now start writing the code in a code editor, which is Visual Code in my case. You could be using any other code editor as well. And here we'll start now creating different folders. All right. So we'll follow proper project structure. So we'll have controllers, we'll have database, we'll have helpers, models, and routes. We'll also have our main.go file, which is at the base of this project. And we can start from the models actually. So let's start from the models. Inside models, you will have a file called usermodel.go. Okay, and here we'll call this package models. We're creating this as a package so that we can easily import it in our main.go file. We'll have an import statement, and we'll have a struct. Struct helps us to define our own user type, or our own data type, sorry, The data type that we define here using struct can have multiple different things. So it can have strings, it can have other primitive data types as well, like time and all of those different things. All right. So we want to create our own struct, which is user here, and this struct, which is called as the model, it basically acts as like the middle layer between your Golang program and your MongoDB or any other database. So the database understands JSON, and Golang does not understand JSON, it understands string or those type of data types, right? So you need a layer that basically converts things from JSON to Golang to JSON. All right, so that's how you have this kind of a struct here. The struct will have ID, first name, will have last name, you will have password, email. So we are basically saying that for every user you'll have to define at least these different things. So we'll have phone, we'll have a token for each user, we'll have a user type, we'll have a refresh token. We can skip some of these things. I mean, when you're implementing along with me, feel free to skip a couple of things, but I have followed the industry standard kind of a practice where you accept first name, last name, and their email, phone number both, and then you have the token and refresh token. You can skip a couple of things if you want to. I'm also going to keep created at and updated at timestamps, which is again an industry standard, industry practice. You can feel free to skip it. Then you have your user ID. All right, and here we'll have primitive dot object ID. And where does this primitive come from? We'll basically be installing the go.mongodb.org/mongodriver/bson/primitive package. The reason for that is we want to use bson here, _ID, and first name is string, whereas for JSON we can define it like this. So it's first name inside double inverted commas, and validate required minimum is equal to 2, max is equal to 100. All right, so you're telling Golang that, hey, in JSON, when you're talking to the JSON database, this is what it's going to look like when it's stored in the database. But when you get it from the user, from let's say Postman, or when you're working with this data type, it's going to be called first name with capital F. But when stored in the database, it's going to be called first name with a small f. And you also have validations that first name is required, and minimum it has to be at least 2 characters, and it has to be maximum at 100 characters. And then you have the last name, which is again string, password, which is again string, and email, again it's string, phone number, again string. By mistake I've kept capital S here. That shouldn't be the case, it should be small s. Token is again a string. User type, string, and refresh token is again string. So created at is a timestamp, so it's going to be time. Now we'll have to use the time package that Golang provides us. This again is going to be timestamp, and user ID is going to be string. All right, now let's start working on the JSON side of things. In JSON, this is going to look like this: last name. Let's validate it. Let's say required. You can choose to not keep it required if you want to, but I've kept it required field. Then you have comma minimum is equal to 2, comma maximum is equal to 100, and close the commas. Here again you'll say JSON password validate. Password obviously is required, minimum 6 characters. And here you can have so many more validations, right? That you need these many special characters and capital words and all of those things and numbers. So you can keep all those validations. I'm not doing that because this line will keep continuing if you want to actually put all the validations required. So the validations I'm keeping quite simple and straightforward. For email, we'll have validation. So this is a validation type, in the sense it will make sure that it has an @ right, and all those different things. It'll make sure of that. So the email is the validation type and it's required. And here you again have JSON, you have phone number, and validate is again required. With phone number also you can have multiple validation criteria, like for example it should be maximum 10 characters, should be minimum 1 or 2 characters, right, with phone number. And you can also have that phone number cannot have special characters. So you can have those kind of validations as well. I'm just keeping it short. Here you have JSON token and JSON user type. Now this is probably new for you. So here we can validate using in JavaScript, like you have enum, right, that a value for a particular field can only be of 2 particular types or 3 particular types, right? You can show those values, you can list those values using enum. Here also in Golang you have a very similar concept. You have required and equal to admin, or it can be equal to user. So this is the same concept as enum. All right. And here we have JSON refresh token and JSON created at JSON updated at JSON user ID. Perfect. So this is your model file. So the model sits at the center of the entire program, and the other most important thing obviously is our main.go file. So let's start working on that. We're obviously going to call it package main. It's going to import a couple of things, and then we're going to have func main. So for import, I know that I'll be using OS and I'll be using Gin-Gonic. So I'll say github.com/gin. Actually, before that, let me install it. So I'll say go get github.com/gin-gonic/gin. So it's going to get the Gin-Gonic package for me, and this is very similar to basically saying npm install, right? So we're saying npm install a particular name of the package, and here we have github.com/gin-gonic/gin. Perfect. And now you'll say port is equal to os dot get environment port. So we'll have an environment file, and then we'll obviously get the environment, and if we have set something for port, then it will be imported into this variable called port. And then we'll also check here if there was nothing there. So if the port is empty, then you at least need something, right? So you'll say port is equal to 8000 if there's nothing there. And for router, we'll say gin.new. And we'll use that beautiful logger that you saw was already a part of Gin, so we'll say gin.logger. And we'll have two types of routes. We'll have auth router and user router. So let me just save this file for now, and then let me create in routes, let's create two files. One is going to be called the auth router.go. The other is going to be called the user router.go. Sorry, it's go. Right. Now for both of them, they're going to be part of the package called routes. So here we'll say package routes, and here also we'll say package routes. Perfect. Now in our main.go file, we'll say routes.auth routes. So you must be asking, where does this routes come from? These routes are nothing but the package which is routes. So we'll say routes, and where does it come from? So we'll say Golang JWT project /routes. Right. So in our routes folder, we have two files which are of the package routes, and we're going to be accessing them using this routes variable. So we'll say routes.auth routes, and we're going to pass the router that we just created, the gen router, into this auth routes. Similarly, we'll say routes.user routes router. So by now, I think you must have understood what Gin is helping you do, right? Gin is basically creating a router for you. Very similar to the Mux router that we've used, the Gorilla Mux router. So it's quite similar to that. But it's just much cleaner. So even Fiber package also helps you to do something similar. And here we'll create two APIs. So we'll say router.get /API 1 func c star gin.context. So in these router handler functions, when we are using Gin, you don't have to pass the W and R, those response and request, right? If you remember in my other videos, you have to pass in your func handlers, you have to pass W and R quite a couple of times. But here all you have to pass is Gin context, and you'll be able to access the response and request from here itself. So we'll say c.json. You can also set headers like this. So we're setting header to 200. So in my other videos, you must have seen that I have to actually set the headers, right, when I send response, w.set header, those kind of things. But here you don't have to do all of that. Gin takes care of all of that. So that's why people like using Gin. But if you know the other way, the raw way of building APIs without using any fancy tools like Gin and Fiber, then you'll probably might be able to create your own router library yourself. So that's why I try and stick to the very basic packages like Gorilla Mux and those ones. Or sometimes I don't use any package, right? The problem with using the pros with using a package to help simplify things is that it saves time, but there's a con as well, that you don't really get to learn the underlying basics of a language, because once you're just dependent on packages, you can't really change a lot of things. So this is what happened with a lot of people when they were using Ruby on Rails back in 2011, 2012, that they were so dependent on the framework, which is Ruby on Rails. They were not able to actually make changes below the surface, below the abstraction layer, right? So I always suggest, so I've been a Ruby on Rails developer, so I always suggest to people that, you know, don't just learn frameworks, learn the underlying concepts, because then you can build your own technologies, you can build stuff, you have a lot more control. You can actually go inside the packages like Gin and Fiverr and make changes of your own and, you know, sort everything out. You can do all of that stuff, right? Only if you know how those frameworks were built in the first place. So we'll say access granted for API 1, and then you have another API called API 2. So we'll say router.get API/2, and we again have func c star gin dot context, where C is capital, and here again you'll say c.json 200 comma gin.h says success access granted for API 2, and all you have to say is router.run and put this colon there and say port. Port is basically 8000 in this case if in the environment port is empty, otherwise it'll be whatever we define in the environment variable file. All right, so we've created our main.go file, we've created the structure of the entire project, we've created our user model, and we have quite a few things to do. Well, I'll have to keep this video short because I have to you know, take a couple of calls. So tomorrow I'll just continue this and I'll show you the rest of the things, the rest of the files. And I apologize if I am not able to create very long videos, but you know, I'd rather put videos every day than put really long videos on just one day, because at least I believe that if you break down your learning into days rather than doing everything on one day, you learn more, because you basically build, you know, memory, you build what do you call it, cognition, you build familiarity with the syntax. So I believe that if you really want to learn stuff, build your learning on different days rather than doing everything in one day. It'll just help you more. Anyhow, so I'll have to leave now, and I'll you know, continue this tomorrow. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next episode.